Let's do one more. We'll get to some sound in a second, but I want to do one more organizing lesson. Can we get the graphic we had up before again? Joshua has another lesson for us. And we're going to place, this is using the Simpsons to solidify this lesson. So want to start setting it up for us while Matt gets the graphic?
Sure.
Or here it is. Go for it.
Cool. So if you're just tuning into the
guys?
post game and didn't hear it before, what we have in front of us is it's like half a pizza pie where there are 5 slices. And what we're going to do is map our terrain using this tool. So I'm going to ask you, Michael, to map out. This is an exercise I do with groups sometimes that have a hard time, that maybe don't have a lot of experience with actions. And you're familiar with The Simpsons?
Yeah. I'm sure I'm like this less of a Simpsons head than many people in the audience, but I know the characters.
Enough. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So let's say that we live in Springfield, we're in The Simpsons, and Lisa has a campaign to shut down the nuclear power plant.
All right, sounds good.
So Lisa is obviously active ally.
And then we're about to get like 50 Discord. Lisa's going to hurt the fight against climate change. Does Lisa totally unscientific.
Does Lisa know about thorium?
All right. So stipulate that Springfield's not dealing with a climate crisis, but it's dealing with a negligent nuclear power plant. Exactly. Okay. Lisa wants to shut down the power plant. Yes, we have Lisa.
So we're mapping out her campaign.
Okay, great.
Where would Marge go?
Passive ally, I would think.
Why?
I think, if I recall from the show, Marge usually gets to the right place. She's pretty smart. She seems like she has some empathy, but she's obviously, an overworked, lower middle class. Does she have a job too? I know she takes care of everybody in the house.
I think the complicating factor is her husband's job.
Husband.
Mm.
So
that's true.
So she might be.
Because
so we know.
Power plant.
Yeah. So Homer works at that power plant. So she might be passive opposition.
I think we're gonna need Matt on this. She's passive opposition.
But neutral. Passive opposition to neutral.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or she's gonna be super torn. I don't even know how to answer that. Matt.
So
I think Matt should definitely be in on this process.
Yeah.
Because I'm not Simpsons oriented enough.
Okay, so we're landing Marge somewhere between passive allies and neutral because she's the mother of Lisa. She has moral values, but her husband works for the plant. So let's talk about him. Matt, where does Homer go?
I would say he's at possibly active opposition, but he's kind of a lazy guy. So maybe he's passive opposition, and he'll go with the flow if the power plant shuts down.
Why?
Why would he be passive?
Yeah.
Because I think that just the laziness. Maybe
he likes to drink. Doesn't he just like to drink beer and watch TV?
He'd be like one of these guys. Like he'd be a Trump voter whose factory gets shut down immediately after.
Okay.
So there's some debate about Homer. Yeah, he could also be neutral, right? Because. So he has a material self-interest, right? He works for the power plant, and if it gets shut down, he's out of a job. He's also the father of Lisa. He also doesn't like his job.
Yeah, he hates his job.
He hates it.
He hates his job, and he does love and respect his daughter. Isn't that one of the things of the show that he kind of gets, that even though she's like 8, she's much more intelligent than he is?
Yeah. So what we notice from using this tool is that Homer has conflicting self-interest, right? As most people do.
Well, as does Marge, of course.
As does Marge.
Right.
Homer's are a little more material because it's his job, but it's basically the same for her, right?
Right.
And so if you're organizing,
and I don't know, does she have her own job, or is that the sole source of income?
I don't think so. I think he's the sole source of income.
Okay,
right?
That's heavy. That's a lot.
So if we were mapping this campaign out and wanted to organize Homer, what we would notice is he's got forces pulling him in one direction and the other direction, right? And so what we would want to do is enhance the things that pull him to the left, and then figure out what does he need to neutralize the things that are pulling him to the right, which is a different job, right? And so immediately we would know, okay, we need like a green jobs campaign, right? And we need to organize with the workers of this power plant. If we just shut it down and let workers high and dry, where not only is that not part of our theoretical politics, but it also, you can't win the campaign, right? And so, but maybe actually Homer's like an idiot and like a doofus, and we don't care about him in particular, but we do care about the other workers. So Matt, where are Lenny and Carl at?
Ooh, I don't
This
know.
is this is where we're pushing
too
up
much?
on my limit of Simpsons knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we find Lenny and
I
Carver?
know.
on
I could imagine Mr. Burns probably invested in the power plant. He'd be active opposition.
Wait. No, those are just but like. All right, I don't know much about them, but I'm assuming they're Homer's workmates, right?
Yeah, they also work there.
They're stablemates.
They also work there.
So are they like smarter or like do they have different character traits than him or
yeah,
are they
they're
just
smarter. We care more about them, let's say. And so let's say we put them in neutral because we don't know.
Yeah,
right?
we don't know.
So
we don't know
if-
enough
if we
about
don't
them. We need
know-
to do a poll.
Right. So where would we do a poll? Do we know where they hang out?
They hang out at the bar, right?
Yeah, at Moe's, right?
All right. We got to send David Grisham to Moe's.
So
That's the only thing I know.
so we don't know where Moe's at either. But what this tool helps us do is realize, okay, there's a social institution.
Well, Moe's going to be worried because if all these guys lose their job, he'll have a job concern too.
That's
if they
right.
will lose their
Yeah,
job,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not going to go buy beer to drink their misery away.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're worried about getting Moe's approval, right? We don't know
Right.
where he would land on here necessarily. We know that there might be a fear, but we do know that the only institution that they're connected to outside of the power plant is that bar. And so if we want to be able to organize with workers, we need to actually be able to have access to that space. So it doesn't matter where they're at yet, but it does matter where Mo is. And so what this chart would help us do in the campaign is identify, okay, Mo's a key person to connect with because that institution is necessary to build a base with the workers of this power plant so that we can enlist them in the campaign, right? And so we don't know where he might land, but so one of the uses of this tool is to discern, right, which audiences, which groups, which social blocks are important priorities for our campaign because a campaign is a timeline, right? And so the bar comes first, right? So
Right.
you mentioned Burns. So Burns is obviously active opposition, right? So it's obvious that we're not going to win the campaign by like changing Mr. Burns's heart.
Although if you talk to, and this is I shouldn't name it, but if you talk to some pundits who are maybe less politically sophisticated, they will tell you that the campaign starts with Lisa going to Mr. Burns and persuading him to do the right thing. So that's actually still a belief that's out there.
Yeah.
Crazily
Well,
enough.
what's interesting about that belief is I
Yeah.
actually think that that's a necessary step in a campaign.
Okay.
Because you actually have to go to the power holder,
Right.
try to persuade them, have them say no, and then you have a
then
basis to
filter it.
organize
I
people,
see.
right? Because then
I
you're
see.
like, they won't respond. If you don't do that,
Right.
people are like, why are you like getting all upset? Why don't you just ask?
Oh, that's
So
fascinating.
you don't go because you think they're going to say yes. You go because you build a tool that you can use to educate your base, to build your muscle, to leverage your pressure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he's active opposition. Moe's is the key place we need to figure out where Moe's at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're going to get our raw political intelligence.
Who else might be active opposition?
Burns's assistant guy who's in love with him.
Smithers.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Why?
Well, he's quite emotional. Actually, like all kidding aside, if I recall correctly, he's quite emotionally attached to Mr. Burns. So
Yeah.
it's not only a job thing for him, because if it was a job thing, maybe he could be, particularly him, because presumably he might have more job prospects as a more like, educated, credentialed kind of person. But he actually seems to have a real emotional connection
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Mr. Burns.
Yeah, he's
So that
totally in
might
love with him.
supersede everything, yeah.
Yeah. Although,
But
Bur-
Mr. Burns doesn't treat him well.
no. And he's been, this is like maybe Simpsons trivia that's a little in the weeds, but he's disagreed with Burns privately before, right? And so he's not always down. And even if the plant's shut down, Burns is rich. He's still going to need an assistant. He's not out of a job.
True.
So Smithers, we don't know, but there's a chance that Smithers might be actually sympathetic, but would never do it publicly.
Right.
I've been on real campaigns before, and I could like give an example if you want,
Please.
where we have had an inside person in the company who has to have public allegiances to the company that we're campaigning against, but will feed us inside information. And that identifying those people is key. And so if we were mapping this out, we could identify Smithers as potentially that person. And maybe he won't go for it, but it's worth a shot.
Definitely.
And that also goes back to what we were saying before of like, it's about finding the strategic roles for these folks based on their relationship to power, like we don't need Smithers to go out and like declare that he's against the power plant, right?
Not at
What
all.
we actually need is him to stay close to Burns and to give us the information we need. That's the key role he can play, right? And so when we use this kind of tool, we can get actually really specific and targeted with the kind of work we're doing, which is what we did with, it'd be kind of a larger story that if you want me to tell, I can tell after this, but we went after the Royal Bank of Canada for their funding of the tar sands, which is like the largest oil reserve on the planet.
Right.
And they're sort of steamrolling indigenous communities. And having an inside person was key to us getting the information we needed to have a smart strategy. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we're kind of running this out. There's
All right,
we
so
could
what
play
about
this
my
for a
favorite
I
long
got
time.
one more.
character was-
Krusty.
Yeah.
Krusty goes to Moe's. Because
Krusty
he's
goes.
probably
What about Bart?
Yeah, what about Bart?
I was gonna say that's really hard because he's either active opposition because he's just wants to beef with his sister, but on the other hand, I feel like Bart has great anti-establishment instincts.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, loves his sister.
I mean, he
and would
skateboards through the
and he-
skateboards through the power plant.
So he's
doesn't he?
cool.
Yeah.
So basically, I actually think he is a very I'm going to go with actually at the end of the day active ally who could be enlisted.
Or at least passive initially. Yeah.
Well, passive initially, but I'm thinking like if you went to him with the right like this is a way to like skateboard through the power plant.
Do a kickflip in the reactor.
Yeah.
He's going to be
He's good with the slingshot.
Yup.
He's good with the spray paint can.
Yup.
Right.
He's a culture jammer.
He's a culture jammer. And
Yeah.
so this is so a lot of activist groups are like, "Oh, we don't want to do this tactic because it'll alienate people." That is like a non-comment. like any tactic you do will attract some people and repel others, right? And so if we're running a direct action campaign specifically against the power plant, we might want the Barts on our side. And so we might want to do confrontational direct action because he actually has skills that we can use, even though because he might not actually like follow the group, he might not stay in discipline. There's a cost potentially to it,
Right.
but it might be worth it. And so if we pick a tactic to attract the Barts of the world, right, that will enhance that piece. Or if we're picking a different route because we have a different strategy and we want to organize the church, right, we would want a tactic that, I don't know, gets like Reverend Lovejoy involved, right, because he has this connection to the church. And so it's not that like tactics are neutral, and it depends on your strategy. And what charts like this help you do is assess, okay, based on our strategy, what tactic will be a different push or pull factor for here. So if we mapped out like the church on here and Reverend Lovejoy, if we mapped out whatever, Krusty the Clown, if we
Go to
mapped out the
Krusty
bus
and tell him
driver,
that it's a PR coup for him.
there you go.
Krusty would love it.
So and like it basically gives you a sense of your terrain and helps you understand like there's costs and benefits to any choice and any tactic, and your calculus is based on either building power because you don't have enough of it, or wielding power because you do have enough of it. And all of those calculuses are different. And I'm trying to think. There was one other kind of character on my mind, but I might have lost it. Oh, yeah. I guess the last like element that's worth mentioning is the mayor, Quimby.
Oh, right.
Where do you think he would go?
He's totally neutral in the sense of, well, no. I would have to imagine that in such a small town, running a machine, he's got funding from someone like Mr. Burns.
Yeah, power plants run small towns.
Right.
Right.
On the other hand, the way he's written is, he's some type of Kennedy figure. So presumably, if Mose decided that they were anti-power plant, he'd at least have to pretend.
Yeah.
So I would say but he's super sneaky. He might be the opposite of the inside track you talked about before.
Right,
he might be the opposite of Smithers.
Yeah,
he might
yeah,
be
yeah.
the active supporter who's really active ally who's really like secretly plotting with Burns about how to water the whole thing down. So I would be
Yeah,
very
yeah.
wary of him.
So we can never trust him to be on your team, on our team. is what you're
I mean,
saying.
not that you couldn't use him, but I would never. No, I wouldn't put trust in him. I would not.
Right.
He seems very hacky, and ultimately Burns still has the checkbook.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And he is, a poll monger, right?
Right.
And so So the difference between him, so let's say what you just described is like he could kind of be anywhere on here depending on what's in his immediate self-interest that we only maybe sort of know.
Right.
And so Burns, because he has a deep, obvious structural interest in the power plant, we're never going to win by changing his mind.
Right.
So we shouldn't waste time on him. But Quimby, on the other hand, is highly influenceable based
Right.
on the direction of the wind. And so if we had a campaign where we needed a villain, like someone to vilify in our campaign, I wouldn't pick Burns because Burns he's happy to be a villain.
Gives a fuck, right?
Right. But Quimby would actually be receptive to pressure. Right? And so this also helps you with target selection and figuring out with clarity who are your primary targets, who are the secondary targets that it can influence that target, and who's not movable. Right? And so it's a really dynamic tool that you can use in 1,000 different ways. But the reason why I like it is it helps you figure out what research you need to do, figure out both who are you trying to organize, but then also clarify your targets.
And this helps demystify for people why you might target Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's another typical lazy, like, why they're closer to you.
Go to
Why
Mitch
are you
McConnell.
protesting them?
Yeah.
You should bother Mitch McConnell, who is
Exactly.
very much a Burns
who they
figure.
also protested, but people didn't.
Yeah, I
notice.
mean, sure, you should protest him in a different way for different targets. Like Mitch McConnell should never be able to enjoy a meal.
That's the underside of the circle.
Right, exactly. As long as, of course, you're observing the law and not being physical, fuck that guy.
Yeah, don't embarrass us.
Yeah, don't embarrass us, but don't let him ever enjoy a meal. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.